great power,
there must also come great responsibility.
Even now we're screaming out for the whole world to hear.
Words alone cannot describe Fullmetal Alchemist as a story. To this day, it remains one of the best animes and manga to have ever graced my existence. While it may not be in my top 5, I won't fault anyone for having it in theirs. Despite what I said about my issues with Brotherhood, it's still phenomenal. I can't in good faith say FMAB is the best anime of all time because of this one flaw: pacing, along with the 2003 series and the manga respectively. Even the lackluster Conqueror Shambhala, but maybe that's because of my nostalgia bias. Regardless, Fullmetal Alchemist is a series that everyone should experience at least once in their lives, both incarnations. To me, Fullmetal Alchemist is a teacher. It does more than tell a compelling story, but it teaches the audience that actions have consequences, and everything you do, you must take accountability for. That with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And that is today's topic. But before we get into that, hit the subscribe button if you're new here. I really want to get to 5,000 by the end of the year, and every bit of engagement helps. Leave a like on the video, leave a comment, and follow me on Twitter. And with that out of the way, let's get back into the video. The majority of us were once children. Some of you watching this video are probably teenagers, while others like myself are adults. Growing up is enjoyable, but it's also difficult. Numerous factors affect your life, new worries arise daily, and some of us pine for simpler times. This is especially true of Edward and Alphonse Elric. Many of us would sit and feel sorry for ourselves, blaming external reasons for our errors, looking for justifications for when things go wrong. It's far easier to blame other things than it is to accept responsibility. It might be in a relationship, a profession, or even something more intimate. As I said, Fullmetal Alchemist is a teacher. We learn through its characters. Edward and Alphonse navigate life in the midst of adversity, clinging to their mother's memories, their last vestige of blood family apart from each other. They are children. They make errors, and all they desired was to be reunited with their mother. I'm sure the majority of us could empathize. We've all lost a friend or a family member and would give anything to see them again. However, no matter how hard you try, the dead cannot be brought back. And as tragic as it might be, death is a normal part of existing. This does not negate the necessity, or rather longing, of resurrecting the dead. Despair motivates people to make actions they regret later. Alchemy and the prospect of human transmutation. Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. In those days,
we really believed that to be the world's one and only truth.
Nobody has the right to take a life is a common phrase you'll likely hear. More importantly, it's a topic of discourse that generates discussion. Another vein of debate on this grapevine is the cost of human life. What is the value of a human? Fullmetal Alchemist poses this question throughout the series, but it does so unconventionally. Rather than framing the object of human life in terms of taking it, it asks what is equivalent to restoring human life. Everyone understands the cost of killing, but no one understands the cost of resurrecting someone. This question is answered as soon as the first episode of the 2003 series. The Elric brothers dabble with the forbidden art of human transmutation in an attempt to alleviate their sorrows and depression by resurrecting their mother. What might they have to offer in exchange? Nothing. Or so Ed reasoned. They had lost so much, surely that was sufficient compensation, right? Generally, rules are established to protect people from danger. There are exceptions to these concepts, but they are irrelevant when it comes to alchemy's laws. These laws contain only truths. They are not to be taken lightly or violated, particularly the taboo of human transmutation. After all, What could possibly be equivalent to a human soul? Their childlike innocence leads Ed and Al to commit the unthinkable, to commit alchemy's greatest sin in an attempt to resurrect their mother. Ed loses one of his legs, and Al comes dangerously close to death. It is only because of his brother's quick thinking that his soul was able to be bound to his suit of armor, otherwise he would have been swallowed up by the void. However, in exchange for his soul, an arm was taken. Even after all this, their mother wasn't able to be resurrected. Al sums it up perfectly. In exchange for playing God, the two effectively cripple themselves, returning to square one with far worse consequences than where they had begun, without a mother to guide them. The exchange was far from equivalent, which is why human transmutation is taboo, to demonstrate how inconsistent equivalent exchange is when it comes to human transmutation. We look at Izumi and the truth about human transmutation. When Izumi attempted it, parts of her external organs were taken in return for her stillborn baby, rendering her infertile. It's almost a cruel joke. Not only was she unable to reclaim her child, but she was also unable to reproduce, as if the laws of alchemy were laughing at her. Such a severe punishment. You cannot resurrect life, so therefore you are unfit to even create life. It would be redundant to describe why these two events would be soul-crushing for a parent, but consider for a moment that all of this occurred because she was unable to accept death. Now, on to human transmutation, specifically the truth of the matter. It is established that resurrecting humans through human transmutation is impossible, as a soul that has departed the mortal coil has entered the afterlife and can never be resurrected through human methods. The attempt will fail due to the inherent lack of any substance capable of matching the value of a human soul, at least in Brotherhood and the manga. 2003 is a different story, and we'll talk about that later. The law of equivalent exchange is invoked, and in an attempt to locate something that fulfills the theoretical criteria, a body part of the equivalent size is taken. Izumi lost her internal organs, comparable to the size of a baby. Ed lost a leg and Al lost his body in exchange for an adult woman. What happens then is something is created in place of a human soul, a humanoid figure that is twisted and grotesque beyond imaginable, bearing no resemblance to what the alchemist intended to bring back to life, and it dies shortly after, rendering the entire process meaningless. Rubbing salt in the wound would be a massive understatement, but instead of letting this crush them, the Elric brothers and their teacher alike use it as a motivator to keep going. Edward gains new motivation at the prospect of recovering his brother's body rather than succumbing to his grief and rolling over to die. He takes accountability and accepts responsibility for his actions and even bears responsibility on Al's behalf. He matures as a result of the traumatic experience because of the mistake. October 3rd, 1911, or rather 1910, depending on which version you watch, is a pivotal day in the series. Ed and Al are forced to mature on this day, because it is the day that they embark on their trip to become state alchemists, burning down their house as a reminder to themselves that they cannot return once they have embarked on this journey. Ed etches this date into his pocket watch as a result. A lesson without pain is meaningless. That's because no one else can gain without sacrificing something. But by enduring that pain and overcoming it, he shall obtain a powerful, unmatched heart. A full metal heart. Death is a very prevalent part of Fullmetal Alchemist's DNA, if you couldn't tell by now. The first arc centers on the subject of resurrecting the dead. However, this is a fabrication propagated by a false prophet. Father Cornello is someone who, in more ways than one, stands in direct contrast to Ed, from his views, his disrespect for alchemic laws, and even his lack of knowledge regarding alchemy. He was the ideal antagonist to begin the series with. as he embodies an all too real aspect of humanity. He earns the populace trust and then utilizes religion to control the masses. Cornello is a man who abused his great power. He used it irresponsibly, but ultimately was a pawn within the series' larger narrative. One of his devout followers, Rose, a girl in a similar situation to Ed and Al, who is grieving the loss of a loved one, in this instance her boyfriend, does something that many of us who have reached the end of our rope would do as well: seek religion. That is, if you aren't already a religious person. She should consider herself fortunate to not be an alchemist. The arc concludes with Ed and Al exposing Cornello's fraudulent deeds, imbuing Rose with a full metal will, and providing her with a purpose to move forward despite her inability to see her boyfriend again. This lesson could not be passed on if the brothers hadn't committed their transgressions. Thus far, the story's key themes have been responsibility, death, acceptance, but that's not all FMA has to say. Therefore, let us continue. Another core element of the story is growth. Edward and Alphonse start the series as children, 14 and 13 respective, but they are not awarded the same privilege as most prepubescent boys. Fullmetal Alchemist universe is cruel, it's violent, and because alchemy exists, the characters are forced to inhabit a universe where its secrets are terrifying. Chimera and Homunculus exist, and something is always lurking in the shadows, behind every corner, down every alleyway, within the government walls, on the streets, within an entirely different plane of existence. As each mystery unravels, the boys never falter. Regardless of the circumstances, they continue forward. FMA is a story about two boys maturing into men, despite the fact that they live in a world that is determined to impede this evolution at every point. A wonderful illustration of this is when Barry the Chopper attempts to mislead Alphonse into believing that all his memories up to now were faked, in an attempt to sever the brothers' bond. When Al confronts Ed about this, he handles it admirably. He's not prone to anger, he's not emotional, he simply walks away. The level of maturity I aspire to attain. That's not to say he ignores the situation outright by walking away. He does indeed confront Al after giving him some time to come to his senses, or rather, giving Winry some time to knock some sense into him, as he reaffirms Al that his memories are not fake. Speaking of maturity and growth, let us consider Roy Mustang. Mustang possesses a strong moral compass. He takes full responsibility for his sins in an attempt to redeem himself as a co-conspirator in a genocide. Roy, like the Elric brothers, was idealistic. That was until he single-handedly ended the conflict in Dahlia, ultimately ending the entire civil war. After witnessing so much bloodshed and being forced to murder your neighbors, he changed. He was meant to be a hero. He enlisted in the military to defend, not slaughter his own. While several other state alchemists choose to relinquish their license as punishment for the crimes they were obligated to perform, newly appointed Lieutenant Colonel Roy Mustang had other ideas. He desired to alter the system. He desired to be a leader rather than a pawn. He wishes to rebuild the nation of Ishval that he assisted in destroying, and ascend to the position of Fior, completely overhauling the military in order to prevent such a thing from ever happening again. In the 2003 series, he's so guilt-stricken that he's shown almost taking his life, and he's hesitant during his fight with Ed because he is reminded of a Ishvalan child. But back to brotherhood. When come face to face with Envy, it was one of the most memorable and defining events in his arc. Mustang's moral compass is tested when he's forced to choose between killing the person who sparked the Ishvalan war and killing his best friend, Mace Hughes. Now, the outcome of this conflict has generated some controversy among fans, the message conveyed occasionally becoming distorted in the dialogue. The crux of the conflict is restraint, determining when enough is enough. Mustang does not adhere to a no-killing policy. After all, he killed Lust previously. So what makes this situation so unique? Didn't Envy deserve to die? At this point in the story, the characters demonstrate clearly that Envy deserves every piece of pain that comes his way, but not from Roy. Why is this the case? The purpose of Roy Mustang is to lead his people and reconstruct the region that he helped destroy. A leader must exercise restraint and composure in order to avoid becoming a dictator. Roy desires to kill envy not out of necessity as he had done with lust. He desired to do so merely for retribution, allowing his emotions to run wild. He desired to torture him. He was fighting a fight out of anger, and since he had already won, there was no need to continue fighting, especially someone who was no longer capable of putting up a decent fight against him. A leader must detach himself from acting out of anger. Notice, I did not say become angry. That is impossible. However, it is possible not to let that anger dictate your future actions. Mustang slaughtered hundreds, if not thousands of innocent people during the Ishvalan War. And yet, he aspires to be pure. Consider for a moment that someone who murdered your people becomes pure and claims to want to change and reconstruct the land that he helped destroy. Wouldn't you be skeptical? I'm right, aren't I? And naturally, the people of Ishval would feel the same way, which would naturally foster conflict. What if someone else Mustang cares about is killed? If he crossed the line with envy, who's to say he wouldn't do it again? At that time, he was about to give the death blow. His colleagues attempted to reason with him, and Roy threatened to injure them in his pursuit for revenge. He was uncontested. No one would be a match for the Flame Alchemist if he decided to kill everyone in that room. Realizing that once he had passed that line, no one would be able to help him or trust him to make sensible judgments as a leader, he stops. Contrast this with his final battle against Pride in the 2003 series. Roy doesn't confront or even kill Pride out of revenge sake. He does it as a form of atonement for his own sins, really showing the difference in characterization between the two iterations. As I sat in the theater watching Matt Reeves' Batman for the second time, the final monologue hit me. The first time I had seen the film, I had not been writing the script, but now with this video in mind, the final monologue of this film speaks volumes for Mustang's character in Brotherhood and the manga. I'm starting to see it now. I had an effect here, but not the one I intended. Vengeance won't change the past, mine or anyone else's. I have to become more. People need hope, to know someone's out there for them. The city's angry and scarred, like me. Our scars can destroy us, even after the physical wounds have healed. But if we can survive them, they can give us the power to endure and the strength to fight. Before I wrap this video up, let's talk about one last topic FMA tackles: humanity. And what better characters to finish this video on other than the Homunculi.
It's okay to eat fish, 'cause they...
The Homunculi are essentially the 7 deadly sins. While their origins differ from 2003 to Brotherhood, I'll primarily discuss their Brotherhood incarnations with light mentions of 03. They were created from the parts Father rejected of himself, so he could transcend to godhood. In other words, he attempted to reject his humanity. In 2003, the Homunculi are born as a result of the botched human transmutation. Despite their superhuman abilities and embodiment of each sin, they all share very human characteristics, and I'm not referring to their appearances. They demonstrate fear, grief, pride, cowardice, and anger on a broad scale, despite the fact that that may not be their primary sin in quest. Lust refuses to back down against Roy, making her final prideful stand, or Pride succumbing to fear in a moment of desperation, going against his prideful nature as he tries to take the body of a human, the one thing he despises. Envy takes his own life once his facade is seen. Envy transforms into grief, not being able to form genuine relationships like humans, departing our main characters with a tearful farewell. He was envious of humans, him, an immortal, more or less perfect creature, jealous of fragile human. Envy's death in itself is one of the saddest moments in the series, despite how deplorable of a character he was. These are just a few of the moments that get into the nitty-gritty of what this series is all about. The beautiful irony of the homunculi occurs in their final moments. Their deaths have a significant impact on the story and its characters. Lust was killed by Roy Mustang, a man notorious for his womanizing tendencies on top of his desire, or rather I say lust, to become Amestris's new leader. Greed was killed twice by Father, first boiling him to extract his most precious component, and then again to extract the same valuable component during his final confrontation with Edward Elric and the military. Wrath is killed by Scar, one of the series' most vengeful characters in the first half, going around killing every state alchemist regardless of if they had anything to do with the Ishvalan War or not. But I won't go into detail about every single homunculus death, but these four really stood out to me. One could say that their deaths represent our main characters overcoming their pride, lust, and wrath, respectively. If we look at 2003's homunculus death, I'm only going to mention one, so we'll address Sloth. Given that Sloth's body is Trisha Elric, and she retains all of her memories, and killing her, I'd argue, symbolizes him finally being able to let go of his guilt and grow beyond his failure, his sin, and truly become a man. It's amusing to me that despite their diverging routes, these two characters share one constant, at least in my opinion. It is the character of Edward Elric, who more than any other character remains totally untouched throughout FMA 2003 and Brotherhood. This is Grimtoki, this has been Beyond Animation, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
たとえ遥か遠く離れ離れになる